Now that we have a really good understanding of networking, HTTP, as well as how Express provides us functionality to interact with HTTP across the internet, now we're going to dive into how do we set up an Express app. Now there are several different ways to set up an Express app. One of the easiest ways to set up an Express app is to go ahead and use the Express generator. So if you go to express.js.com, which is where the Express application framework lives, under the Getting Started, there is an Express generator page. So if you go to that page, you can see that we can use npx, which is the node package executor, to actually execute this Express generator npm package and have it actually build a Express application for us with all of the predefined structure that this generator gives us instead of doing it all manually. It's fine to do it manually and create your own structure, because really Express is a pretty open framework, meaning that it allows you to do pretty much anything you want within your project structure. But there are some common structure to these Express applications that people follow in order to make sure that they're maintainable and easy to understand. And so we're going to use the Express generator just to keep things simple and to give us a predefined project structure that is easy to maintain and understand. Now to do that, we're going to start off by, of course, creating ourselves an empty project folder to execute our generator in. Now under Tim, I have a dev folder. Now you might be doing this different, but I have a dev folder under my user account. And then in that, I have a repo folder, which is where I like to keep all of my repositories that I'm working on actual projects. But I also have a sandbox folder, which is where I like to put a lot of stuff where I'm just showing something, or where I'm testing a new technology, or where I'm just playing with something or practicing. And so I'm going to use this sandbox. And then I'm going to go ahead and create a new folder, and we're going to call this Express-demo. And you can follow right along with me in order to make sure you understand how all this works. But we're going to use this Express demo. Now it's an empty folder, as we see right here, and we are going to, using the generator, actually build all of this into our, or all of the structure. And then we'll go over the structure on how it all works. So let's do that. Let's go ahead and open up our Visual Studio Code. That's the tool that we're using on both Mac and Windows. And then, being that I don't have a project open right now, I'm going to go ahead and go to Open, and then go to Tim, go to my Dev, go to Sandbox, and then my Express demo, which is that new folder I just created. I'm going to go ahead and open it. And now you'll see over here I have Express demo as the currently open project. So we'll go ahead and close those. And now I've just got Express demo. And that is my currently open project. We see that we have no files or folders. We could manually set up an Express app, but again, we're going to go ahead and use the generator. So go ahead and open up your CMD, your command prompt, or your terminal if you're on Mac. And then we need to navigate to the folder that we just created. So right here, if we look at this, so I'm going to go ahead, since I'm already at that folder, I'm going to go ahead and go back to the root of my application. So if I do an ls right here, we should see that I'm in the root of my user account. And you can see my dev folder right here. So I'm going to cd into dev, and if I do an ls, you can see I've got my dev or my sandbox folder right there. So let's go ahead and cd into our sandbox. Do an ls on that. Let me clear this up so it's clean. ls, and then you can see we've got our Express demo folder right here, which is the one we did. So we'll cd into express-demo. And then if I do an ls or dir on a PC, it's going to be dir in order to show what's in there. On a Linux machine like Mac, you're just going to do ls for list the directory contents. So we've got nothing in there, it's completely blank, but we are at that Express demo right here. You'll see the path that we're at, the folder that we are currently in. So Now we're going to go ahead and let's go back to the website, and really we're just going to use npx to execute the Express generator package found in npm. npx is going to go ahead and locate this npm executable package, and then it will begin to execute that and set up our application for us. So let's go ahead and go back to our code, open up our terminal again, and now we just do npx and then it's express-generator. I believe it was generator, so let's look at it really quick. Express-generator. Now usually these kinds of commands that create stuff and modify your hard drive by adding files and folders, if you do the dot instead of the name of an application, if I did the name like my app, it would create a new folder called my app, and inside of that folder it would then generate the folder structure. But I want to use the current directory I'm in, so I'm just going to use the dot to do that. And so the Express generator just went ahead and it set up a publics folder, a routes folder, a views folder, the app.js, a package.json, a bin, and a bin.ww. All right. Now, of course, as with all Node applications, we have to make sure that we install all of the dependencies so that we get ourselves a node underscore modules folder inside of our project. Now, I'm going to go back to my file system, go to my sandbox, go to my Express demo, and we can see here inside of Express demo, we've got all of the stuff here that was generated. Now, for some odd reason, inside of my Visual Studio Code, it is not showing that even though I have the Express demo app. So if you're running into that, go ahead and click this refresh button right here. And now we can see everything that was generated. And of course, it includes a package.json, which allows us to, of course, include all the dependencies that the application has using npm. Now let's run through the structure of the Express application, and let's look at this basic implementation. Now again, Express allows us, if we wanted to do all of this manually, to set up an Express app with one file. It can be quite simple, and it can also be quite complex. But we're using the generator, so we're going to run through, number one, what each of these folders are for, as well as the files in them, as well as these two files right here. Now we're all familiar with the package.json. It provides npm functionality to our application and lists all of the dependencies on which our application requires, and also sets up our startup scripts and things that we need in order to test and start our application. Now, if you notice in here, this package.json, it shows under scripts the start command. When we do npm start, it is going to call node, just like we would in the terminal, and then it is going to tell node to execute the file that is located at this path. So the root of the app /bin/ww. With that, we can infer that this ww file right here is actually our web server, and it's also akin to our index.js or our app.js or our server.js that we might have in other applications that we build with Node. So www. So let's go look at that one first, and then let's follow it to all the other files that are inside of this application. So bin www. If we open up the www, usually what it means when it has no file extension when we're building a Node application, and because it's in the bin folder, that implies that the file here is our executable file, meaning that it's the file that Node should be executing. It shouldn't be executing app.js or any of these other files inside of these other folders. It should be executing the executable file. And that is done simply, that's kind of just a pattern that people follow. If it doesn't have a .js on it, it's just a folder, just a file, and it's inside the bin. It's most likely your application entry point or the executable file that starts the whole thing off. And it's usually what gets passed to Node in order to kick that off. Now we look inside of this, really, it requires or imports our app, which is this file right here. and then it goes through setting up a debugger so that we can debug our application. Sets up an HTTP server so that we can listen on a port. And right here we can see the port. It either comes from our process.environment port variable, or else it uses 3000 if this doesn't exist. And in a later video, we'll get into what all this is. But really, if you think back to our discussion about Express on our computer and how it talks to the network card and listens on a particular port for HTTP traffic, this is where we're defining that port. And in that video, you saw that we either use port 80, port 8080, port 8888, or port 3000. Those are common ones that we use. Then on our actual Express app, which we're importing from this file right here, which we'll get to, we're going to go ahead and set the port. And then we're going to go ahead and create our HTTP server, the one that actually listens for all the HTTP requests. And we are going to pass in our Express app to that server. And then our server is going to listen on the port. And then we're going to go ahead and provide some functionality for handling errors. If an error happens within our application, we are going to want to listen for those errors and then handle them. So an event handler is provided called onError, which we see right here, onError. And so if there's an error, in this case, it's going to go ahead and throw the error so that we can look at it. And then here, it's going to go ahead and note some stuff down about the error. And it'll print it out to the console, you can see right here. So if you run back up here, then also we've got the server.onListening. And so we've got an onListening handler down here. So that's really when the server connects, it connects to the port and everything's working and there's no errors. Then it's going to print out to the console or to the debugger that the server is now running and it's listening on a particular port over a particular pipe. And it's just informational right there. All right. And then this function right here, normalized port, it's really just something that is set up there to handle ports if the port is not a number. So if we run into a port that is not a number, then it's going to go ahead and use the port that we set up here if the port that we get through here is not a number. If it comes in as a string or letters or something like that. So it's just a way to handle that just in case that happens. So that's basically our executable file that will begin running our server with our Express app running inside of it and listening on a particular port for requests that come across the network card for our machine. Now the next one we're going to go to is the app file. So bin relies heavily, so this www file, our entry point to our application, relies heavily on our app file. So let's go ahead and look at the app file really quick. In here, we can see that it pulls in a module that handles HTTP errors. We can see that we are actually requiring in Express, so this is where we're getting the Express framework pulled into our code in order for our code to be able to handle HTTP requests and responses. We're pulling in path, so that's one of the node modules. We're also pulling in a cookie parser, which allows us to parse cookies that come in from browser requests, as well as a logger called Morgan that allows us to log information about the requests that are made. Here we're pulling in two routers. Now the routers are what handle our web requests based on the path in the URL that comes back. And we'll get deeper into this in a minute, but here's where we're just requiring in our routers. Now these routers, as you can see, are found locally. In other words, they are files that were created with the Express generator, and they provide us kind of a pattern for when we want to create our own routes. And we can see the folder right here, and we can see these two routers right here, and we'll get deep into those in a minute. Then we go ahead and create an Express app. Here we're setting up a view engine. Now, when we do the Express generator, it is setting up Express to be a monolithic application, meaning that the application also provides functionality for generating, building, and creating the HTML that gets sent back to the client upon each request. In other words, instead of just being an API that just sends back JSON data, this particular application is a full-blown web application, and it will construct and send back all of the HTML that gets generated on the server. Now, this is different than a single-page React application that would be a separately running application that would integrate with an API. That's a little bit more complex pattern. Traditionally, web applications were monolithic, and they had all of the Vue and JavaScript and CSS and HTML. That was all done by the server. And later on, we'll get into how we separate that out into a single page application and an API. For now, we're going to realize that this just sets up a Vue engine, and the Vue engine, it needs to know where all the views are. In other words, all the template HTML that we use to compile and create each HTML page that would be sent back to a client. And here we're setting the path for the views, and we can see a folder here called Vue. And inside of Vue, we will see these three files called error.jade, index.jade, and layout.jade. Now, .jade, we'll talk about what Jade is, but it's really just a markup language that makes writing HTML a little bit easier. And the Vue engine Jade, it actually uses these Jade files when it compiles HTML and sends it out to the client in the response. Now, if you don't understand that right now, we will get deeper into that in a little bit. Here we're setting up the logger, and we're specifying that all the logs coming through here are in development mode. We're using the Express.js middleware. In other words, whenever we see app.use, we are setting middleware to be used by our Express app, and those middleware all get executed before our routes get handled. Now, you don't understand what middleware is yet. You just need to know that this is middleware. And it all gets run, all of this custom code gets run before our code gets run to handle these requests that are coming in. And we'll dive deeper into middleware in a future video. So here we've got a logger. We're using the JSON library that knows how to read and compile JSON for our responses. We've got a URL encoded library, a cookie parser for parsing cookies that are sent from browsers when the requests come in, as well as a static path for static resources. Now, what I mean by static is that in an Express app or any web application that is responsible for compiling all of the HTML and sending it back to the user, it may also be our static resource server as well, meaning that it serves up all the images that we might have embedded in our HTML pages. It serves up all of the JavaScript that might be included in our pages, and it serves up all of the style sheets that hold the CSS for the look and feel of our HTML pages. In other words, not only is it a dynamic web server that dynamically compiles the HTML, but it also serves up static resources. And the reason why we call them static is because once the images are created, we don't modify or change them using the server. Neither do we do that with the JavaScript or the CSS, but we do with the HTML. The HTML is dynamically put together by the Vue engine. So we need to have a location for all of our static resources. Now up here, we saw how we imported our routers, and they were imported from our route folder right here. Here we're actually setting our Express app to use our routers as middleware to handle any requests that come in for this path. For example, if www.myapp.com was where my application was running, and / if this came in right here, any request get, put, post, or delete that has just this path after the domain will be handled by this router. Whereas this one right here, we have a path of /users, which means that the same thing, www.myapp.com, anything that has a /users after it, I need to add one more / for my comments to work, www.myapp.com/users, so anything that comes in after the domain using this path, which is what's specified right here, will be handled by this router. So if I have a user's slash, this slash path will be handled inside of this router. If I have a slash login, then the slash login path will be handled within this router. And we're going to see how that works when we open up these routers and we look at those. To continue with our app.js, we're also going to catch any 404 page not found, which means if a route comes in that is not handled by either of these two, if we haven't added more routes down here or more routers to handle routes, then anything that comes in with a unknown route or path in the URL is going to be handled by this, and it's going to send back a 404 not found. So if I don't have a www.myapp.com/unrecognized. So if I don't have a router up here that handles this unrecognized path, the requester who made the request with this path, because it's not handled up here by any of these paths or any of these routers, they're going to get a 404 not found. And so that's what this function does right here, is it handles any request that is not handled by a router. And in this case, this one would not. And unrecognized, if that's confusing you, it could be something for a resource that my application doesn't handle, something like test results. If my application is really just a storefront and I'm really just selling stuff, and then somebody thinks my app is a medical app and they ask for test results, and my app doesn't really deliver test results, then they would get a 404 not found, telling them that what they're requesting for does not exist in this application. Then, of course, we've got ourselves a error handler, just in case an error happens within our application that we have not manually handled, or if there's an unexpected error that happens in our application. And then, of course, just like with all Node modules, we export the app. And this exported app is actually what was being imported in our WW right here. And it is what is being handed to the HTTP server as the app that all HTTP requests will be passed to by our server once it's connected to the network and listening on the port. So that's an overview right there of our app.js. This is really where the Express takes over and starts handling everything within all the HTTP request and response within our application. Now let's dive into routers. The routers are super important in our application because the routers handle all of the HTTP paths that come in with the URLs, which we just talked a little bit about. And we're going to focus on just these two, and we're going to see how that works. So let's go ahead and open up our index router. So if we go to routes and we open up this index.js, we will see that we have imported Express. So we're using the Express framework again. And out of the Express framework, we are pulling out the router object. And here, we've got ourselves a router that we're going to be using. Now, if we look at our app right here, any path that comes in that has a slash, so the root of our web app, which is what that says, anything that comes in to that is going to go to this index router. And here you can see, very similar to what we were talking about when we talked about HTTP and HTTP methods, we have a router, and the router handles any GET request for the root of our website, and it handles it with this event or this handler function. Okay, and with this handler function or this callback function, it's going to handle this particular request that came in. Now, every handler function or callback function that the router takes in for a particular path will take in an HTTP request, as well as an HTTP response and the next object or the next function. Now, we're not going to dive into next right now. We're going to focus solely on the fact that the router, based on what HTTP method came in through the web server and the path in the URL, it will assign this function to handle any of those requests that come in. And if we look here, this response.render is actually calling the view renderer, and it's saying, hey, go find the view index, which is right here under view, and you can see this index.jade right here. It's saying, go pull that view, let's compile it using the view engine, let's put some variables into that view with Express right here, and you can see we're using title in here, and so this is the title, and the value is Express, and we are injecting title into this h1, or this header tag, and we are injecting title into this paragraph tag, or p tag. And then we are sending it back as part of the response. So the request represents the HTTP request that came in and all of the information surrounding it. And response represents the HTML response or HTTP response that we will be sending back to the caller who made this GET request. And then this is how we tell the response what we want compiled and sent back to the end user. If we head back to our app, we can see that anything with a /users is going to be handled by our users router. So let's go ahead and open up the users router. And just like the index router, it pulls in Express because Express is providing us all of that HTTP functionality. It's pulling in a router so that we can handle paths or routes that are coming in. The path off of the HTML URL is equivalent to a route. They mean the same thing. And then router.get, here we're handling a HTTP get for the slash, which is the root slash, so it would be this slash right here in our path. You can see it's not included on this path. So we're handling this slash, or the root of the user's path. And here is our event handler, or our callback function, for whenever we get a GET request at the root of our /user's path. Again, we get a request and a response. And in this situation right here, instead of using the view engine to compile Jade, or to use Jade in order to compile HTML and send HTML back, we are simply sending text back. Because you can see we didn't use the .render, which is right here, because when we call .render, Express knows to go use the view engine that was set and to go find a template or a partial to create that. Here, we're not sending back HTML, we're sending back straight text. And then of course, we export the module as a router, which we see up here, where we're exporting those two modules, and then we are setting them to be used as middleware after all the other default middleware gets executed. And then, again, if we don't get a path like /test results that is handled by either of our routes, then we get a 404 not found. The cool thing about all of this is that when we want to add more paths, such as if we wanted to add a products section, we can say app.use and /products, and then we can create for ourselves, oops, let's go back, we can create for ourselves a products router that we would then have right here. So let's do that really quick, just so you can see what I'm talking about. I'm going to go to my routes folder right here. I'm going to add a new file. I'm going to call it products.js. And inside of this products folder here, I'm going to go ahead and, of course, we're going to do the same thing. We're going to import Express, and we're going to import a router. And then we, of course, have to export that router back out so that it can be used as middleware. And then right here, we can actually have it handle getting a list of products. So get products instead, right, of users. And now that I've got this products router, I can add to my application this products, but we, of course, first have to import that router now. So var products router equals require, and then I can go ahead and pull in from my routes folder my products router. And now that I have a products router right here, I can set it to be the router middleware that handles any request that comes in, that is www.myapp.com/products. And so now I'm handling this route, whereas before I wasn't. It would have been a 404 not found. So now that I'm handling /products, inside of my products route, I am handling the root request of my products route, which would be a path like that. I am now handling that by our router, and it's going to respond with this. And I'm just going to go ahead and change the message to no products yet. Come back later. And now, if we do get a request coming in from www.myapp.com/products/, they're going to get back plain text that says there's no products yet. Hopefully that helps you understand the project composition, what each of these folders are for, and what is contained in these folders, and why we have them. In other words, the structure of the application is meant to help us have a very logically laid out application that is easy to understand, easy to maintain, and logically easy to figure out where a particular thing is that we're looking for that we need to work on. And in this case, app is the Express app. Bin is our executable file that starts up the web server. Views holds all of our HTML templates. Routes holds how we are handling all of the incoming HTTP requests. And public is for any static stuff that gets stuffed into our HTML, and that has to be loaded by the browser once the HTML gets pushed out to the end user, to the client. Now we're going to go ahead and end it there with that overview of an Express app and all of the files and folders that are there, why they're there, what they're used for, and from that point we will begin to work on an Express app that will show us how to dive deeper into these features and build a more complex Express app.